Manage, protect.
To the MPmail v2 portal. This portal is currently sitting at control, https control.manageprotect.com. Once again, as I said, this portal can be branded, the fonts can be changed, the color scheme can be changed, and the URL can be changed. So it can be set to a URL that's totally off your domain. It can be spamfilter.your website address, or whatever you choose it to be. We also have the options of .manage.net.au and also .sascontrol.com.au. So one of the key things you'll notice from the portal is when you first log in, it puts you straight into the workspace. I'm logged on here as a partner admin. There are a lot more role options with V2. So you can basically configure a V2 user to have a partner admin account, or you can have a service desk account. You can even have a tier 1 service desk account, which may only provide your tier 1 service desk engineer access to the workspace, and they may not be able to do any provisioning or creations of accounts. So where I start is I'll start off by bringing down a list of the accounts that I'm managing from this login. So if I go to manageprotect.com, you'll see immediately this will start off by populating the messages from today. Now, the design of V2, this interface, is very service desk oriented. So the idea is that if somebody's going to call your service desk, the chances are they're calling to find out what happened to a message. Did it get delivered? It didn't get delivered. What's actually gone on? But it's usually about a message more times than not. So the first thing they'll provide you is information. Was this today? Was this yesterday? 2 days ago? You have 90 days worth of logs here which you can access. You can also be very specific and actually configure it to a specific date and time range if you wish for this search. By filling in these details, these are all currently set to wildcards. So basically, if we say we're looking for a specific email from seanstitt@gmail, if I double click on that, you'll see it populates the from and it brings up those 3 emails. If I populate the to as well, it'll basically come up with 1 message or 2 messages. I clicked on support, and from there you can see that they were both clean and that they were delivered. By mousing over the status, we can actually see there the 250 code and the details of the delivery. By clicking on preview, we can then click on SMTP and see the specific details of that message queued mail for delivery, which is also up here in the details. If I reset these, and you'll notice currently I've set to incoming, so I've got a choice of incoming, outgoing, or both. But if I now set this to show me spam messages, we'll see the spam messages of today. And let's say we have a message here from Christian Mingle, and we can see the reason code that's been blocked there. If we then click on preview, we'll see in the SMTP section, it hasn't been delivered because it's in the quarantine. If we look at the text section, we can see the details of the message. So we can see where it's come from, the originating sender, domain key details, and then further down here, we can actually see the full reason code. One of the things that you'll notice from V1 to V2, V2 has a lot more transparency, as in we can see specifically the reasons why items were stopped as spam, why items were let through, what rules were followed. So if from this stage we then commissioned a research report, which we can do, we can then find out specifically why this particular rule was triggered on this email. And if it was incorrect, we can then have that rule changed so that it's more accurate. You also notice from this screen, you can look at it and say, okay, this message was actually meant to come through. And if we tag that, and then we do a report action of deliver the message, that will actually send that message through. If we whitelist and deliver, it'll automatically add the sender address to that particular user's whitelist. If we blacklist the sender, then once again, for that particular user, it goes onto their blacklist. The other 2 options of report spam and report info mail go directly to the threat center. So if you report it as spam, it'll go to the threat center engineers in the threat center will look at those messages, determine why that message got through, and in this case, of course, it is spam, but if it was a real message that did go through but it wasn't tagged as spam, then it would go to the guys and they would adjust the rules so that it wouldn't get through the next time. You also notice from this panel we have access to the email archive. Now for all message continuity customers there is a default rolling 90-day email archive. For customers who also have the email archive technology turned on, that can be up to 30 years of email archive. So if I once again bring up the Manage Protect, I can then select any particular message, tag it, and click on Deliver. That will deliver that message again from Sean@gmail to support@manageprotect.com. So this is a way whereby if you have a customer, they're on message continuity, they have ultimate access, and they ring up and they say, oh, we need to get the last 2 days or 10 days or frankly up to 90 days worth of messages resent, you can do it all from here. You can also tag an array and actually deliver them. So by this way, you can actually resend or redeliver a lot of these messages. Everything in MPmail creates an audit trail. So there's a detailed audit trail that goes back to, frankly, the start of time. So the audit trail doesn't disappear. We can see users when they've logged in, and in this case, this is Damien and myself. I've logged in here, logged in successful. We can see when blacklists have been adjusted, filtering rules have been changed, and we can see what it used to be and what it is now. We can also see what IP address it was done from and what URL. So for those circumstances where you have a customer that may ring up and he says, okay, this has been changed, how has this occurred? You can at any stage go into the audit log and find the specific details of any change that has occurred. MPmail v2 also allows you to do global whitelists and blacklists from this panel. So if you select a specific email and you want to whitelist it for the entire company, it's frankly as simple as clicking the message, selecting whitelist, and perform action. So that will whitelist it for the entire organization. By clicking on blacklist, that blacklists it for the entire organization. Global blacklist and whitelist can be managed from up here. So if we go into blacklist whitelist section, and once again you can control who has access to these individual tabs and controls on a per user basis and a per group basis. So if you have different areas of your service desk managing different types of tasks, you can configure their access here. So from a user list and whitelist and blacklist, you can select individual accounts and see individual users, whitelists and blacklists, or global customer whitelists and blacklists. You can add to them from here and also export to CSV. MPmail v2 management is all run through the management tab. So this is where basically you set up users, you set up domains, you configure IP addresses to deliver to and IP addresses to receive from. By clicking on the little chevron on the left, it brings down a list of customers. You can start alternatively just typing the customer in there and it will go straight to it if I hit enter. This is particularly handy if you're looking for a customer that's multiple layers down or a domain alias of some sort. So if we go to manageprotect.com, the first thing you'll notice by going onto the customer itself, and the customer is the domain, this is where, if you wish, you can set up restrictions and rights management. So if you wanted to set up a user that had access to certain items on the menu, this is where you would configure the role initially of that user. You would then allocate different roles to different people. By clicking deeper into that chevron, you can see the domains are listed, the users and groups. Under the domains, the first domain, as you can see here, is highlighted. So that's the primary domain. If I click on that domain, this is where it contains all the information on actually configuring the domain for sending, receiving email, basically all the mail filtering functions. All of the domain aliases below here inherit all the information from the primary domain. So basically, if using the same destination IP and the same policies across all of the domains, they should be domain aliases such as this. If you want to have different rules for different domains, then you would deselect the inherit from primary domain. And that's where you can actually set up different subdomains or different domains aside from your primary domain within that same customer. You can also then configure different spam reports based on the individual domain. So you can have different branding for different domains, and you can also have different actions and different timing. If we go back to the primary, this is where we have the configuration of the mail filtering. All customers by default, when we provision them, are set to premium filtering. Premium filtering is basically using all of the anti-spam technology and antivirus technology within the MPmail v2 system. The first thing that we would usually set up is also where the messages are delivered. So this is either an IP or a host name, or into the local POP IMAP mailboxes. You can have multiple delivery destinations. You can have them basically enumerated by a hash for priority and separated by semicolons, as you can see there. We then have outgoing relays. So these are the IP ranges that we accept messages for outbound. These are separated by commas, and they can be in CIDR notation. Bounce management blocks any sort of NDR spam, which basically means that you won't receive bounce back messages that are created by spammers to try to get messages through to your customers. Relay checking basically makes sure that when an email comes in, and if it's set to SMTP, what that means is that the message will come into us, we will establish a connection to the destination mail server, and we will initiate that SMTP transaction. If that transaction says this user doesn't exist, it will bounce back to the sender that the user doesn't exist. The other options aside from SMTPs, we can do that through Ldap. We can do that through specifically control panel users, so only the users in the control panel will be known, or we can turn this feature off. Advanced routing allows you to deliver messages for one domain to multiple mail servers, and that's very handy if you have a scenario such as you have a domain where you want to split delivery into some MP Exchange mailboxes, maybe some Office 365 mailboxes and some IMAP mailboxes, or you have a customer who has multiple offices all trading under one federated single domain. Spam filtering is handled in this area here, where you can basically decide whether you want to quarantine the messages, and that's a 90-day quarantine, or you just want to tag them. If you do tag them, then you can put any phrase that you wish up there. InfoMail is newsletters. So basically, if your customer wants to continue receiving newsletters, they're probably best to deactivate InfoMail. They can do that on a per user basis, or they can do it globally. The next tab in the in MPmail v2 is archiving. So if you do have an archive function, this is where it's actually enabled and this is where it's accessed. We can set the archive for anything up to 30 years, and the default setting is 30 years. Individual users can access the archive through either the Outlook add-in, through an iPad app, or an iPhone or Android app. They can also access it through a normal website, and we'll cover that in another webinar separate to this one here. But one thing I will mention is you can also set up in this space audit access. So if you want somebody within the business or external to the business which needs to access and search all the emails within the archive, this is where you configure and set that up under archiving, audit access. Continuity. Customers who have MPmail Ultimate Access also have access to the continuity service. The MPmail message continuity allows, in times of outage, people to continue accessing and send and receive emails for their domain. So basically, if their mail server goes off the air, they can immediately log into a webmail portal. But also with MPmail v2, you can now access your emails through IMAP or POP mailboxes. One of the things that we've seen some customers do is in preparation for any outage, they'll set up a second profile within Outlook or a second profile on their iPhones or iPads, so that if there is an outage of service, they can quite simply just click on this second profile within Outlook or on their iPad, continue to send and receive mails, and then when everything comes back, those messages are fed back into those Exchange mailboxes. The spam reports section is where you can configure how often people receive spam reports and what content they have on those spam reports. By selecting InfoMail, spam, virus and content, all those will appear on the spam quarantine reports. If you wish to receive a message to one address, that's where you'd select an email address for cumulative report. And if you would wish to not have viruses listed on there, which would be probably default from most of our configuration, that's where you set that. If I move down through the screen, you can actually see these are the times that are configured. You also notice whenever I make a change, it actually appears down the bottom here under the messages, which is really handy when you're actually doing lots of changes to multiple customers. Content filtering is a little bit different to MPmail v1 in that content filtering here is purely attachment types. So basically, rather than being keywords and documents, this is where you select an attachment type, you apply it to a group, whether it be the default group or specific groups that you set up under the users over here. And these rules typically will either cut the attachment and inform the receiver, or they'll block the email. Now, whether they're doing either of those things, they still appear in your quarantine, so you can then control what to do. So we generally recommend to cut the attachment and inform the receiver. So the recipient, if you're blocking, and by default we block .doc macros, executables and XLS macros. If you're cutting a .doc macro, then the recipient will receive the text of the message, they'll realize that it has been stopped, and as an administrator or as the service provider, they can contact you and say, actually, can you receive that message, or can you send that message? And then you can make an informed determination on whether that message should be allowed or not. You can also configure maximum mail size, and these obviously you've got incoming and outgoing there. The compliance filter sits at the top of the stack. So basically any email that comes in, the first thing it does is hits the compliance filter. Configuration of the compliance filter allows you to basically set up any inbound or outbound rule, whereby if it's from a domain, let's say, and it contains this IP address, then what do we want to do? We can either redirect it to another user, we can reroute it to a different IP address, we can tag it as clean so it's not picked up as a spam or a virus, we can tag it as spam so it actually gets blocked as a spam, or we can tag it as a virus. The other option is we can BCC it somewhere else. You also have specific searches where you can apply on email header or the email body. Now with all of these rules, you can actually configure regular expressions within this filtering. So it is very, very powerful. But one thing that you need to be aware of is, as I said, this rule, the compliance foot rules, hit before any of the other filters. So it hits before virus checks, it hits before spam checks. So anything you do here will basically bypass anything else you do in policies below it. Now we come to the encryption panel. The encryption panel allows you to configure what type of encryption, what sort of security MPmail establishes with other mail servers, effectively allowing you to have an end-to-end encrypted message and signed message between one customer and the people that they're communicating with. Within the window here, once you've activated the encryption policies, you can actually check to see what sort of encryption the recipient can support. So if I type in andrew@manageprotect.com, you can see that from a mail server, from an Exchange server perspective, we support TLS, we support SMIME, but we don't support PGP. MPmail v2 will always opportunistically try TLS, and will try SMIME, and will try PGP. You can force it to try TLS, in which case you may wish to exclude certain domains from that forcing. The mail footer tab is where you can configure what sort of mail footer or disclaimer appears at the end of your messages. You can set these by group, and it can be either text or HTML. It says plain text there, but basically if you enter HTML into that window, that will display a HTML mail footer. You can also put exceptions where you don't wish that mail footer to be sent, and that's either on a per domain basis or email address basis. Going back to the management section in the left tab, you'll see that we also have users displayed here. If we click on the overall user area, we can see that this is where you can add users and you can change their passwords. So if I select a particular user, I can create it here as test123. I can make them at manage protect, and I can create a new password for them and add them. These users are both either users within the system as far as policies management, but also the users as IMAP POP mailboxes, if you have that configured. You can import these users by selecting the import tab here, which then allows you to select a file and import directly in. If I go onto a particular user, I select a user from this portal, you can see that I have activated InfoMail filter for this user, so you can turn the InfoMail filter off at this point. You can go in and actually set their password. So if you need to reset a password for a user, you find the user, you go down to password, you put it in there and hit save. You can change their spam report settings to be different from the default. You can manage aliases for the user, and you can also manage the deputy function here within the user area. Groups can also be managed. So by adding new groups into this section, you can basically select groups and apply which members are to the groups. Groups then allow you to set policies such as content filtering and also which footers you want to apply. Groups can also be used to manage things like advanced routing, where you can say for specific users or specific groups, deliver messages to one IP address, and for all the other users, deliver it to somewhere else. One other thing I'll mention before finishing off this webinar is the role function on the right hand side is extremely useful. From the role function, I can log in as my partner admin, I can log in as my own individual user, and if I find andrew@manageprotect.com, by clicking on that, this is actually logging me back in as my own individual login. And I can see basically my own email archive, and I can see my own emails, and I can manage them from here. I can also, and this function you can adjust on a user by user basis, but this is where a user can change their password, their time zone, their language, as well as they can add aliases and manage their spam reports if they want to change them from the standard setting. They can also manage an absence notice, so autoresponders. They can apply a deputy function to allow somebody else to manage their quarantine, and they can select whether they want to have InfoMail turned on or off for their account. In my case, as you can see, I have that turned off. Okay, the last section I want to touch on today is statistics. So if we pull down to the individual customer, we click on statistics, we can bring up information about that customer, and by mousing over you can actually see what these individual sections mean, and you can get an idea of what's actually going on. We can also stretch that out to any period over the last 90 days, but let's say we select March, and we can move this down to a per user basis if you want to actually drill down into a user, but let's have a look at what's been happening for manageprotect.com over March overall. There we go. So we can see typically the amount of clean messages, the amount of rejected messages. And if I scroll down, we can actually also see clean spam virus, and we can basically list the top recipients of clean messages in the last 7 days, and also see what sort of rejected and InfoMail messages there are. We can then export that out to PDF if we wish, or export to CSV for further calculations. Thank you for attending today's webinar. please feel free to contact us if you have any questions whatsoever. Our service desk's available, or 1300 657 500. That's 1300 657 500. Also, we're available on chat on chat.manageprotect.com. All the best with the MPmail v2. If you have any questions whatsoever, please contact us. Have a great day.